You ready for another episode of Jefferson's Salute to the Presidents? Thank you for being here. I'm Thomas Watson, and this larger than life traveler of over 88,000 miles is my bobblehead, Thomas Jefferson. On this show, TJ and I will attempt to tell the story about the mundane life of our 13th president, Millard Fillmore. I know you're anxious to get started, so grab a slice of resurrection pie, Fillmore's favorite, and enjoy the show. Millard Fillmore was born on January 7th, 1800 in a log cabin which once stood on the property behind me in Moravia, located in the Finger Lakes region of New York State. Fillmore was born into poverty, and he spent a lot of his childhood clearing land and raising crops on his father's 130-acre farm. I'm standing on the approximate location where Millard's birth cabin once stood. During my visit on July 7th, 2017, I wished a replica cabin had been erected on the birth site. It turned out the replica cabin was 4 miles to the west. Located 4 miles from Fillmore's actual birth site, I found this replica cabin located at Fillmore Glen State Park. When I first laid my painted eyes on this cabin, it reminded me of a scene from The Wizard of Oz. As a youth, young Millard received no formal schooling. He worked on the farm until his dad forced him into an apprenticeship at a couple of textile mills so he could learn a trade. I'm standing inside the replica cabin, which featured a room that represented where Fillmore slept as an infant. It turned out Millard hated menial labor and he began to read every book he could find. At an academy he attended near New Hope, his teacher was Abigail Powers, and Millard was her favorite student. After reading law for several years, Fillmore practiced in East Aurora, even though he wasn't yet a licensed attorney. Shortly after he became engaged to Abigail Powers, Fillmore was admitted to the New York bar and opened a law practice in East Aurora. The building behind me, now occupied by the famous Vidler 5 and 10 store, was the site where Fillmore's law office once stood. On February 5th, 1826, Fillmore married 27-year-old Abigail Powers at the home of her brother in Moravia. Millard was 26 years old. Following his marriage to Abigail, Fillmore built this small home in East Aurora where he and his new bride lived while he practiced law in town. Over the years, this house had fallen into disrepair and would have faced demolition, but it was saved in 1930 by Margaret Price of Fisher-Price toy fame. Because this was the first home where the Fillmores lived following their marriage, the small 1.5-story house was nicknamed the Honeymoon Cottage. This is the only surviving house, other than the White House, associated with Millard Fillmore. Let's go through the door behind me and visit the world of Millard and Abigail Fillmore. This was the front parlor inside the home. which originally stood on East Aurora's Main Street. The building was moved to an empty lot on Shearer Avenue to prevent imminent demolition. Our tour guide allowed me to pose on numerous historic artifacts, including this original, unrestored chair once used by Millard Fillmore. While I stood on the fireplace mantel in the parlor, I saw portraits of Millard and Abigail Fillmore behind me. The original teapot to my right was used by the First Lady in the White House. It's hard to describe the feeling I had when I was placed onto Millard Fillmore's standing law desk that was filled with his original law books from 1837. The rosewood square piano I'm standing on was brought to the White House by First Lady Abigail Fillmore. Daughter Abby Fillmore was an accomplished musician and she played the piano, harp, and guitar at White House functions, especially when she filled in for her mother as White House hostess. I found this punch bowl interesting as it was hand painted and used by the Fillmores in the White House. While in the kitchen, I had the opportunity to stand on the scrub table that was hand built by Millard Fillmore. The silver teapot to my left was from 1868 and was used by Millard and his second wife, Caroline. This was Millard Fillmore's dresser from his house in Buffalo. In my mind, the dresser was likely in the bedroom when the president passed away on March 8, 1874. The floorboards I'm standing on were hammered by Millard Fillmore himself during the construction of the home in 1826. Millard and Abigail lived in this house for only 4 years before they moved to Buffalo in 1830. After he dabbled in local Buffalo politics for a short time, Millard Fillmore was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1832. On March 4, 1833, Millard Fillmore was sworn into office as a member of the United States House of Representatives. While in Congress, Fillmore served one term before he was voted out of office, but Millard came back in 1837 where he served 3 more consecutive terms. During the 1848 presidential election, the Whig Party selected Northerner Millard Fillmore to be the running mate for their candidate Zachary Taylor, who was a slave-holding Southerner. On March 4, 1849, Fillmore took the oath of office as vice president in the old Senate chamber inside the United States Capitol. I'm standing in the old Senate chamber inside the United States Capitol. This chamber was used by the Senate from 1810 to 1859. The curved desk and mahogany chair was used by Vice President Millard Fillmore at least until July 9, 1850, when President Taylor died in office. Vice President Fillmore during the Senate debate over the Compromise of 1850. Vice President Fillmore was staying in a room at the Willard Hotel in Washington on July 9, 1850, when he headed over to the Executive Mansion to visit ailing President Taylor. During that visit, Fillmore realized President Taylor was dying. Shortly before midnight, a messenger arrived at Fillmore's room at the Willard Hotel to inform the vice president that President Taylor had died at 10:35 p.m. Although not surprised by the news, Millard Fillmore did not sleep a wink the remainder of the night. At 12 noon on July 10, 1850, Millard Fillmore arrived at the United States Capitol where he recited the presidential oath of office in the House of Representatives chamber. Judge William Cranch, the Chief Justice of the U.S. Circuit Court, administered the oath before a joint session of Congress. 2 months after the new president moved into the executive mansion, California was admitted as our 31st state on September 9, 1850. But President Fillmore wasn't finished yet. Although Zachary Taylor had opposed the Compromise of 1850, Fillmore embraced all aspects of the compromise, and it went into law on September 20th, 1850. Unfortunately, the Compromise of 1850 was the most significant accomplishment of Fillmore's term in office. While the president passed the compromise as a way to avoid civil war, one of the 5 parts of the bill was the Fugitive Slave Act. That meant if a slave escaped and was caught, even in the free northern states, they were put on trial by the federal government and likely sent back to their masters in the South. First Lady Abigail Fillmore. Denied nomination by the Whig Party during the 1852 election, President Fillmore left the executive mansion after attending the inauguration of Franklin Pierce, which was held in the cold and blowing snow. Abigail Fillmore was the First Lady to attend the inauguration of her successor, but the ceremony came with a toll. When Millard and Abigail returned to their room at the Willard Hotel, he began to plan an extensive travel trip. While staying at the Willard Hotel, Abigail became ill when her cold became bronchitis, which turned into pneumonia. Abigail Fillmore passed away in the Willard Hotel on March 30th, 1853, at the age of 55. After laying in state in Washington, the First Lady's remains were transported to Buffalo where they were laid to rest in the Fillmore family plot in Forest Lawn Cemetery. President Fillmore was 58 years old when he married 44-year-old Caroline McIntosh, a widow, on February 10, 1858, 2 years after a failed presidential campaign on the Know Nothing Party ticket. When Millard married Caroline McIntosh, the wealthy widow signed a prenuptial agreement making the former president administrator of her fortune. And just in time, too. When Fillmore left office and returned to private life, he was without independent wealth or possession of a large estate. Following his marriage to Caroline, the Fillmores purchased a large mansion along Niagara Square in downtown Buffalo. The Fillmores mansion, which resembled a large castle, was demolished in 1919 to make way for the Statler Hotel, which is the huge building behind me. The home of Millard and Caroline Fillmore along Buffalo's Niagara Square. While living in Buffalo during the 1860 election, Fillmore voted for Senator Stephen A. Douglas, who was the Democratic opponent of Republican Abraham Lincoln. Millard also supported General George B. McClellan, a Democrat, in the 1864 election. When word got out that Fillmore did not support Lincoln in either election, a newspaper branded him a copperhead and even a traitor. Black ink was thrown on Fillmore's house when he did not drape the mansion in black mourning ribbon following Lincoln's assassination. President Fillmore had been in good health until he suffered a stroke while shaving at his mansion on February 13, 1874. As he recovered, Fillmore suffered a second stroke on February 26, which destroyed whatever chance the president had for recovery. On the evening of March 8th, Fillmore was fed some soup while he laid in bed. The president said, "The nourishment is palatable." Within minutes, Millard fell unconscious, with his last words still echoing in the room. President Millard Fillmore died at 11:10 p.m. on March 8, 1874, at his mansion, which was located at this site. Fillmore was 74 years old. Visitation for President Fillmore was held in his home. Then he laid in state at St. Paul's Cathedral, which was followed by his funeral service there. When the service concluded, the coffin containing the remains of Millard Fillmore was taken to Forest Lawn Cemetery for burial in the Fillmore family plot. The horse-drawn hearse containing the remains of President Fillmore was escorted by a long line of carriages when it reached the gates of Forest Lawn Cemetery in Buffalo. In the afternoon of March 10, 1874, President Millard Fillmore was laid to rest in the Fillmore family plot behind me. The president was buried next to his first wife, Abigail. Her headstone was the taller gray marker to my left in this image. When Caroline Fillmore passed away at the age of 67 on August 11, 1881, she was buried alongside the president. Shortly after Caroline's death, this 22-foot tall sandstone obelisk I'm standing on was placed over her and the president's final resting place. During my visits to Fillmore's grave in 2014 and then again in 2017, thick shrubbery surrounded the gravesite, which made it difficult for me to pose alongside the president's small gravestone. But when I returned to Buffalo just prior to the COVID outbreak in January of 2020, the unsightly shrubs had been removed. I felt like a liberated bobblehead, at least more liberated than the slaves who were treated horrifically thanks to Fillmore's Fugitive Slave Act he helped pass. No wonder Millard's initials were MF. I imagine a lot of slaves call him that as well. Hey, you made it to the end. Did you learn anything about Fillmore's life except that resurrection pie looked like a pile of dog? Before you go, please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any episodes and hit that like button. And please leave us a comment. Tell me your favorite Millard Fillmore story. Our next episode will focus on the life of America's saddest president, Franklin Pierce. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.